And so this kind of gets us into the next thing, because I think that at this point we need to do a very in-depth explanation of water filtration. And this is actually contained in one of the semester 2 courses, but I don't mind in releasing this information now because it's practical information. We all need it. And this is about what's actually going on with the back and forth beef between distilled water, spring water, mineral water, tap water, and what was the other version of water? So the distilled water, filtered water. So the waters, okay? So what's going on with the waters? So let's see. All right. All right, so it looks like everyone's connected. I just want to take a moment, make sure we're all connected. So what's going on with the waters? Let me wait for the camera to transition. As you see, I got some transitioning going on with the cameras. Mixes it up a little bit so that, you know, everyone's not just looking at ye old face. All right. Okay, so let me just go ahead and get into this. So what's happening is that water is a big thing, obviously. 70% of our body is water. 70% of the earth approximately is water. So what's going on with water and what do we need to do? And obviously there's a big thing about distilled water and how you should use that, especially over tap water. But there's some in-depth information that you need to know that you can maybe perceive as scientific. So this is like the scientific facts about water and what you need to know about what to do with it in order to get the experience that you're looking for out of it. So let's talk about the first thing. Let's talk about distilled water, okay? The reason why distilled water is so popular is because when you distill water and you take a meter, which measures parts per million, it measures how many minerals or elements or particles are actually in the water. And these meters are like $20, so a lot of people have them. And so when they distill water and they dip this meter into the water, it'll say 0. Sometimes it'll say maybe 1. Versus when you take that same meter and you dip it into tap water, it'll say around 200, 300, depending upon how bad the tap water is. But many didn't notice that if you take that same meter and you dip it into mineral water, you're also going to get a very high count also, because those are minerals present in the water. Now, when I use these terms, spring water, mineral water, what I'm talking about is I'm not talking about necessarily the spring water or the mineral water that you buy in the store. What I'm talking about is the spring water that comes from the spring, and I'm talking about the mineral water that comes from generally the artesian spring. So if you're buying spring water and mineral water from the store, you would still need to investigate the source of where that spring water and mineral water is coming from. So just for specifics here, I'm referring to each of these in their strictest terms. So when we're talking about distilled water, we're talking about water that's pulled right out of the distiller. Now, the issue with distilled water, let's talk about the pros and cons here. Well, let's talk about the pros first. The pros is that distilled water has nothing in it. So all those chemicals have been removed. And this means for many people that I would rather drink water with no chemicals in it because it's pure. But this is somewhat of a misconception. And the reason is because, first off, if you drink this water on a consistent basis, you will find that water is an element that constantly needs to bond with minerals, which are, ions. And so there needs to be some kind of ionic bonding going on. So when there's no bonding, and let me check my switcher here because it seems like it may have gotten itself stuck. Yeah, because I didn't hit it on rerun. 1 second, everyone. Because I know you don't want to be looking at this graphic. So let's stop this real quick. 1 moment. We'll stop this. And we'll start this. And then it's on. Yeah, that thing wasn't on loop, so it's just going to stay there. So, I'd rather you see me here. So what I'm explaining here again is about the water. So what happens is, now what's useful about distilled water is because the distilled water is looking for something to bond with. And this is where the whole notion that distilled water cleanses the body comes from. When you drink the distilled water, it starts to pull the toxins, the minerals, and pretty much many of the deposits from the body, okay? Now, someone created some false information. They said distilled water only pulls the bad minerals out of the body. And nothing can be more silly, because distilled water does not have a brain and to say, that's the bad one, that's the good one, I'm going to eat the bad one. How would that even make sense? If it had a form of thought, it was like, hey, I'm going to eat the good ones. So you can see that that doesn't make any sense. But someone started spreading that around about 15 years ago, and it's been going throughout the network, and no one has ever checked back to see whoever started that saying, and is it in fact true? And the truth is that it's actually not true. Distilled water does not distinguish what mineral and what toxin that it's pulling from the body. But this means that if a person has been drinking tap water all their life and drinking bad water all their life, then maybe a year or two of distilled water is probably in their best interest. Why? Because they have a body full of toxins. And generally, if they haven't been checking on their water, they haven't also been that big on minerals either. So this means that the body is probably filled with a lot of toxins. So for them, distilled water will work. And so this is why you hear many people, oh, distilled water, I tried it, it gave me lots of energy, and it's the best. Don't drink any other water beside distilled water. Okay. Now, for a person such as myself who's been dealing with I'm the connoisseur of water for about 7 years now, I have that much time in actually experimenting with all waters, drinking them, and for years seeing their effects. And what I'll say is that there is a turning point in drinking distilled water. It happens around 2.5 years. You start to experience, because your body is clean, like I don't eat anything crazy. I've been a vegetarian for 12 years, so my body doesn't have that many toxins in it anyway. So after 2 years, I started noticing symptoms of mineral deficiency. And let me tell you what those symptoms are. One of those symptoms are hair loss. Like if you start noticing that you're losing hair and you've never lost hair before, okay, that's one symptom of hair loss, because your hair needs the minerals in order to keep growing. I mean, nails need the minerals in order to keep growing. That's what they're wholly really comprised of, is that silicate and those different minerals, okay? So it needs that. The second thing is that you start feeling tired, okay? And this means that, overall your energetic level is kind of low. And this could be directly a result of distilled water. Other things, of course, but the distilled water, if you're drinking it, could play a component. Another thing, if you're drinking the water and then it's coming right out, this means that the water is not absorbing very well. And this is because also distilled water happens to be slightly on the acidic side, and it doesn't actually absorb really well in the body. So this means that if you take the distilled water through some treatment, it's just like what you would do if you get in the kitchen, you start preparing yourself all of this food. We sit there and we get all the vegetables and whatever you eat, we get it all together. So you have to start thinking of water as being necessary to do the same way, that you're going to have to actually now get into preparing your water. So if you're going to still use distilled water, again, if you're a beginner, you may not need to worry about any of this yet. But if you're more advanced and you're still using your distiller and you're experiencing what I'm talking about now, you're going to need to do one, add ionic minerals to your water. You can find those on Cassar's site. Now, here's where another argument comes in. Dr. Cassar has some really good quality ionic minerals. So one of the arguments is that, well, these ionic minerals, the body doesn't absorb those minerals very well. You're absolutely right. Because the whole goal of adding the ionic minerals to the water is actually not for you to supplement those ionic minerals from minerals in your body. Why? Although your body will absorb some of those minerals, for the most part it won't. It's to add minerals to the water, because the water will bond with those minerals and thus keep the water from leaching minerals from your body, because the water will be stabilized. Thus, when the water gets into the system, again, it won't leach anything from the system, and it will hydrate the system, okay? So just remember, the whole purpose of putting those ionic minerals in the water is not to add minerals to your body. You can get minerals from plants. You can get minerals from all sorts of different substances that are a lot more similar for the body than you could from ionic minerals in the water. The purpose of adding them to the water is to keep the water from leaching minerals from your body, okay? Another one of the things that's brought up that is 100% true is that distilled water is actually not structured. And that's true, that distilled water actually loses its structure in that steaming process. So that perfect snowflake hexagonal pattern that appears, that was proven to appear in water when you look at it in the water crystals, it's completely eradicated because the process of distillation is rather strenuous for the water. So you need to actually restructure the water. And one of the ways to restructure water, and I named 3, and I write all this stuff down in the manual, but one of the ways to restructure water is actually just putting crystals such as citrine and quartz into the water and then placing the water into the sunlight. Because what this does is the sun is actually a major component in structuring the water back into those perfect hexagonal crystals. So that's one way, probably the cheapest, most efficient way to do that. The second way is to find some type of stir plate that can begin to vortex the water, because that also turns the water back into that hexagonal pattern. Now, I talk about the PhiMag 2, which I'll show during the semester, but there's one in the kitchen. I found one on eBay. This is the PhiMag Optimizer 2, and it just vortexes the water. And I found one, like, they used to be really expensive. I found one, I think, for like $150 or something like that. And that is like a off-the-shelf device that the water, and then it adds not only oxygen to the water, but it also restructures the water. So that's a device that actually does it right out of the box. Or else you can find a stir plate, which you can find all over the internet, even as low as $10, $15. And those, of course, you know, they're used for multiple things, but they will put a vortex into the water. So there you have it. That's the preparation that's necessary for distilled water to be on the level. And then obviously you need to consider time. So this is why the whole thing becomes so confusing for many people, is because they'll have like parts of that knowledge and then functioning on parts of that knowledge, arguing with other people about it, and then they'll never get to the conclusion of what's going on. Even if they're experiencing the mineral deficiencies, they'll insist that it's not the water, but in fact it is. The next thing is that, so what you do though is that sometimes, just like you don't eat the same food every day, you can mix your waters. I find this to be very useful, especially since I excrete a lot of water in the workout. So I sweat a lot in the workout from just, burning it out. And then if you throw the distilled water right in right after that, the body could be like, I need something with more, a better surface tension so I can absorb it. So it's then beneficial for me to switch over to, like here where we are, and in Costa Rica, it's quite a bit of places they have still well water. So I'll switch over to the well water, and then I'll put that in my system. Or you may, if you have something like a big Berkey or a really good water filtration system, you can run the tap water even through those water filtration systems and then drink that water that comes out of that, and still find that for, the third year of drinking distilled water, that water that's coming from the Berkey and one of those gravity filtration systems may be better for you than the distilled water at that time. But if you're going to go on a cleanse, you may want to supplement the water. So see what I mean? So you can have these different forms of water, and then obviously you got your spring waters and you got your mineral waters. Now, obviously, if you got direct spring water and you got a spring outside the house, which most people don't have, you don't need to be messing with any of this stuff, because the spring water is going to be naturally mineralized from coming through the spring, and it's going to be naturally distilled, because if it's, the rain distills the water, and then it's naturally structured, etc. So the spring water is really the best water. Mineral water is the same way, because generally it comes from an artesian system or aqueduct or something that's holding the water in the ground. So that's great water. But of course, many people don't have access to that kind of water. So that's why these filtration systems and distillation systems come into place. So hopefully that answers every question that a person may have about water and how to make sure that this water is of greatest benefit to them.